lots of Indian friends, but I've never been in India and don't speak any Indian language, and so I'm a guest here, I guess. I'm very honored to introduce Professor Daniel Davis of the University of Michigan-Dearborn, where he's the professor of linguistics and chair of the Department of Language, Culture, and the Arts. He studied at Harvard and Oxford universities. He taught at the University of Hong Kong. That's the demographic part. I can now tell you the interesting part, which are what his interests and his work and research have been on. World Englishes, the history of the English language, a variety of other things that I'll mention in a moment, including Arab American English, which makes sense in Dearborn, which has, I think, the biggest concentration of Arabs in the United States. I was in Dearborn once and he's executive director of the International Association for World Englishes and a co-editor of the journal World Englishes. Just looking through his publications, here are a few that caught my attention. I don't know if they're the most important ones. Language Learning, Grammar, and Integrationism, World Englishes in World Religions, Standardized English, the history of the earlier circles. I'm not sure what circles mean, but maybe I'll ask you later. And Wittgenstein, Integrational Linguistics and the Myth of Normativity. In addition to his articles and books, he has edited or co-edited at least 4 monumental works. The Handbook of World, and multi-volume, each one of these. The Handbook of World Englishes, the History of World Englishes, the North America part, I guess, 8 volumes. The Development of Celtic Linguistics, 6 volumes. And another Celtic Linguistics Historical, 8 volumes. This is incredible to me. But Professor Davis.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Hoberman. I'm very grateful for the introduction. I should say that I was the executive director of the International Association for World Englishes, but I was succeeded by Kingsley Bolton, who's also my co-editor in the Journal of World Englishes, that was founded by Braj Kotru and Larry Smith. So thank you. I want to say my thank yous first. There are many people to thank. I'd like to thank the Center for Multilingual and Multicultural Communication and Professor Agnes He for the invitation. And also I'd like to thank the Mattu Center for India Studies and Dr. Mattu, of course, and for his, thank both of them for their talks as well today. I'd like to thank Professor Eriko Sato from the chair of the Department of Asian and Asian American Studies, also one of the co-sponsors and co-hosts of the event. And I'd like to, of course, thank the Dean, Dr. David Roble of the College of Arts and Sciences. And I'd like to thank everyone who contributed today to the organization of this just really wonderful and important event commemorating the I don't even say retirement, transition to a new phase of Professors Sridhar, both. So thank you all. Today, as a poor recompense for the kind hospitality, I have a talk that I've entitled Language and Languages, Discourse and Culture in the Work of S.N. Sridhar and K.K. Sridhar. I've used S.N. and K.K. Sridhar throughout, even though my heart was always saying Sridhar and Meena. So I don't know what's actually going to come out of my mouth, is what I'm saying. But here we okay. Here we go. I think this will take half an hour. And I have alarms set up at surprising points. So what I'm going to do here is I just started looking at the texts. I am a humanist. I deal with texts. And so I went back to some of the texts and I was very quickly overwhelmed. So I just chose quotations that I thought were striking in terms of the way that linguistic theory works and the way that Professors Sridhar have used certain aspects of linguistic theory to create methodologies to observe language and languages in the world. And this is, I mean, in a sense, it's an essential part of linguistics, although we all forget that because we get down into the weeds looking at the details. Can everybody hear me okay, people in the back? Okay, good, good. All right, and also, Sam, thank you for fixing this. Now the screen says, the speakers will be relieved to hear that, at least for me, the screen says the same thing as the, Now, the first paper that I wanted to quote was Sridhar talking about, in 1982, about non-native English literature's context and relevance. And the 1982 was a long time ago, wasn't it? Yeah. And yet, in the freshness of your prose, it is immediately brought back to me. No, I'm sorry, but you must read. We are in the fragments of an oral culture. Picking up on what Ted said, we have the fragments of it. Gwir aeth gatraeth oedd fraith ei, right? That's from Welsh, from 1400 years ago. The first 500 years of that were orally preserved, in a way much like I'm making a comparison between the Celtic tradition and the Indic tradition, strong oral tradition. But the oral tradition here is weakened. So if you're just reading the last 5 years of articles, those are good and obviously very important. And I have some catching up to do. I was very happy to see your book, Professor, and I will seize upon it. But I want you to go back and look at some of the pioneering texts in whether it's multilingualism, whether it's translanguaging, whether it's world Englishes. Sometimes you hear the term global Englishes, which is a very recent arrival. I want you to go back and read some of these older texts, which are still very fresh and immediate. This one, Professor Sridhar is talking about what the importance is of non-native literature. Now the term native was used much more frequently. Now it's surprisingly 45 years ago. 1982 seems like yesterday to me. So please don't judge the language. Remember, the language and the discourse has been changing for 45 years. But I want you to go back and read. If I was really cruel, I would choose someone from the audience to read. But Okay, in the Kannada sociocultural context, it's customary for the favor giver to make light of his generosity so as to minimize the asymmetry of the situation created by the role reversal. Raja Rao conveys this subtle convention by literally translating the Kannada idiom into English. Is it greater for you to ask or for me to say yea? The effect would not have been the same had the author used an expression such as, your wish is my command. It's just, and so here's, the first point is, and by the way, every speaker here today has shown this, except maybe me, but is the use of examples. It's like tying in to language. Can you still hear me? Yes. Oh, strange. Okay, language used in context. So part of this talk, if it ever gets to that point, is going to be to look at context. And what does context mean in the context of world Englishes or in the context of context, it immediately pluralizes. But it's the use of examples. And this is a very fresh example, even though it comes from 1943, and it was deployed 39 years later, and we're reading it another 43 years later. The point about this is what you have to do if you decide to choose English as one of your repertoire to write in. And in this paper, Sridhar explores the conditions of that. I won't go through the whole paper, but it has to do with audience, the explosion of writing after the collapse of the British Empire, and what that meant in terms of the growth of an audience in India that had English as one of its languages, right? That's, I'm just skipping over the top. Here's another, quotation that I've selected. This one because it gives a sense of theoretical framework. In these two examples, it's not cognitive meaning or quote unquote illocutionary force that differentiates the native and non-native versions. Rather, it is the choice of language considered appropriate to a given speech situation. Now, I don't know what you hear when I read that, but I hear Sridhar, I hear Braj, I hear Halliday, and most importantly, I hear Firth, right? So this is partly just a musing on different linguistic theorists. The context of situation is very important, very fundamentally important for world Englishes, but fundamentally important for multilingualism. We've seen in every talk today, and that in your use of language, your experience. Okay, moving on. Watching the time too. Oh, I've used up all the time. Okay. But it goes back to speech act theory too. Now, as Katru rightly observes, this one very fresh, immediate to what we were talking about today. The teaching English as a second language profession has proceeded far too long on the assumption that non-native speakers' major motivation for learning English is the so-called integrative one. That is, i.e., id est, to culturally identify oneself with the native English speech community, right? So this was said in 1982, and Sridhar here is quoting Katru, who says it in 1981, building on a tradition of, you can call it resistance, but resistance to the assumption that the only purpose of learning a language is to integrate with the whatever it is. That's in the overseas. I'm not learning English as an American so that I say, may I have a glass of water, please? And I'm anticipating your article, by the way. May I have a glass of water? Can I have a glass? I know it is funny hearing Americans say that. And yet, just keep going. It's like, okay. And again, these are all quotes from the same article, almost sequential. Most learners of English today are in the so-called third world countries. Again, that term was used 40 years ago. But even then, so we had so-called integrative and we had so-called third world. So it's this relativization of the current framework. That framework the framework is still in operation today. Again, we had that, you see these you think, oh, that's an antediluvian educational practice. Surely no one thinks like that. And yet this is a good teacher, who, what I mean, has this bizarre and ancient, not ancient idea, but really outdated idea, like what we think of as a 19th century idea. I'm referring to Professor Ho's talk. But the thing is, so the idea that you learn English to integrate with this faraway country, and it's being questioned here, 40 years ago. So please, one part of this is familiarize yourself with the tradition. You don't have to go back and read everything, but this one is worth reading. Okay, going on, and I apologize for kind of superficial. In these contexts, English will have to serve as a vehicle for conveying various native cultures, traditions, customs, thought patterns, and social concerns. The English teacher must teach the kind of English that can serve this function. So we're talking about functionality as opposed to structures. We're talking about the kind of functionality that's operative within a culture. I've been in conversations with a linguist in Mongolia recently, and a lot of the conversation is about what does it mean to learn English and what should we focus on in learning English. And the focus that this linguist suggested it was to look at Mongolian culture in the context of English. And that does answer to some of the issues we're talking about today. But then, Sridhar, no surprise, but you anticipated that conversation by 45 years. I don't want to bring age into it. That's not good. But anyway, we'll move on. So Creative writers, who represent the most acute and sensitive observers of a culture, have been struggling to fashion English into a suitable medium for the expression of their immediate social and cultural reality. So you said those words, and it makes so clearly for whatever reason, the choice was made to write and to publish in English. By the way, I didn't give half the examples, the justice. The article talks about Chinua Achebe. The article talks about Raja Rao. The article talks about Wole Soyinka. It goes on and on and on with specific examples of from text, but also of language. So it's very much grounded in the social reality of language, social function of language, but also the forms that are part of that reality. If English teachers are to develop, this is the conclusion of the article, the chapter. If English teachers are to deliver the goods to speakers of these other languages, you could do a whole study of the use of quotations, right? But this is published by the way, this was the first edition. I found a copy of the first edition of The Other Tongue, 1982. And I was so happy because it's fun to compare the first edition and the second edition, but also these ideas are from 1982. That's actually important. Even though they were most famously put in the second edition, which had wider currency, 1992, it's kind of significant that this conversation has been going on for 40 years, and you need to familiarize yourselves with it. And again, I don't mean to get up here and scold you, but please do yourself a favor and read this. It will give some depth to the very good. And the point is, it doesn't matter whether or not the ideas are fresh. What matters is that they're currently relevant, and they so clearly are. Right? Okay, anyway, moving on. English in the South Asian context. So I switched to KK Sridhar, to Meena. Also in 1982 in the same volume. This one is just beautifully empirical. That's why I chose this quote. I believe that the data and analysis presented here give us a clear, empirically based picture of language use and language attitudes in a developing multilingual society. The findings confirm the recurrent pattern of the use of mother tongue, with a specifically Indian definition there, in intimate or affective domains. And again, what I like seeing here is, again, this is kind of classic sociolinguistics of locating particular codes within particular domains, but it's essentially on the basis of an empirical study, which impresses me every time I read it. I won't give you the details of the study, I apologize, but there's no time. These data also provide strong empirical evidence to support the claims made about the role of English in present-day India. We have seen its importance in the domains of mass media, academic and professional interaction, administration, and interstate communication. It's very hard to teach world Englishes. I teach world Englishes in an American context. The problem is I'm an American in an American context. It really requires bending your mind to figure out these social situations, to illustrate them. I use like monsoon wedding, and you look at code mixing in monsoon wedding, and that gives you a way of giving students an idea of what's going on, at least in one representation of India. But it's also represented in this paper. We've seen its power and prestige. Now, if you read this the wrong way, it sounds like a celebration of English. It adds to this 19th century tradition. That's not what's going on here. But it's critically evaluating the use of English in context. It's not celebrating it, but it's also not sort of ignoring it. Let's put it like that. And so it's problematic. It's problematic. I mean, I do think that the post-colonial metaphor or model has succeeded almost too well. And that when I have sympathetic ears to these issues, they're often kind of dominated by a post-colonialist perception within academia. Outside of academia, the argument very much still needs to be made. But then you end up with this problem that you either have the celebration of English or you have the oppression of English. And the reality is somewhere in between in every society you go to. Okay, enough of that, but that's, all these findings, I like the quotation marks, make sense when viewed in light of what Khatru 1976, again, the debt to Braj and Yamuna Khatru, which, it's the discourse that you're part of, and the discourse, I'll selfishly say it, the discourse that you link me to is, just so valuable and so interesting. Okay, so linguistics has its backwaters, but then it also you find these just pools of relevance that feed into your present perception. The pragmatic role hierarchy in the multilingual's repertoire. In this model, the position of a given language in the multilingual's repertoire hierarchy is determined by very pragmatic considerations. This is taking the point of view, but in Saussure, this would be the point of view of the speaker, right? It's a synchronic point of view, but this is more than Saussure because it's set within society. So the thing is, we can say ideologically, this should be like this and this should be like that, but what are the choices that we face? I can't resist. I was going to tell you this as a private anecdote. I came home from Hong Kong with my 2-year-old son. I'd been speaking Welsh to him in Hong Kong just because dyna beth dwi eisiau gwneud. Bachgen Kingsley, ti'n deall? Yr unig un sy'n siarad Cymraeg, it's the only one who speaks Welsh. Now I'm doing what Sridhar, by the way, that article, I skipped through it, you said, use both at the same time. And I can say it because I'm trausieithu, right? I'm translanguaging. Right? That's, the weird thing is when I say translanguaging, I have to say it with a Welsh accent. So it's translanguaging, doing trausieithu. Anyway, the point of all this is, it's the pragmatic consideration of choice. I brought my son home back to America. I'd been speaking Welsh to him for 2 years. We walked into Home Depot, and I was mute. I could not speak. That was the end of Welsh. Couldn't do it. I couldn't speak Welsh in Home Depot. You tell me why. I just couldn't do it. It's like these are powerful ideology. That was manifest in your talk, was that powerful ideologies that kind of constrain our choices and our will to do one thing. So it's a very so if I looked like I was crying during the middle of your talk, maybe I was, but no, because I was like I lived it. Oh, sorry, go on. Back to Sridhar and Meena, because they created the platform for this conversation. Students and professionals in Karnataka, is that right? Karnataka? Okay, yeah. Again, World English just forces you to go way beyond your comfort zone. And I have students who give presentations and they'll stop, they won't talk. It's like, oh, come on. Feel that English equips them for the largest number. Now, this was in you did that research in 1979. So, we're allowing for change here. Again, don't judge. That's the first alarm. Okay. Next comes the mother tongue. Efforts for propagandists for Hindi, including the federal government, have not succeeded in translating constitutional mandate, someone should put an N in there, into pragmatic reality for the people of South India. Now, I don't want to, it's embarrassing to take something that you wrote and then say, oh, look, you said this, and I'm not doing that. I don't know what the situation is now. That's the basis of another conversation is, still true. I was wondering what you would say. Yeah. So, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they stay the same. What language was that? French, thank you. Merci. Because I sometimes worry that it's all in AI. You don't need to know French. Anyway, sorry, go.
Hindi has made a sense now because of Bollywood, not because of government.
Yes. So it's where the heart is. Yeah. And that influences the choice, and again, the repertoire is, subject to multiple things. Now, I got to put in I know I'm running out of time, but this is one of my favorite articles, chapter, based on a project that Meena did in the late 80s I think it was in Bangalore. Yeah, and again, I should ask you more of I'm only skimming over the top, but basically it was about context of situation, how do you request things? And it was a survey of students from 3 different colleges. One college was more traditional, another college was kind of a little bit more progressive, a little bit more westernized, modernized, whatever terminology you use. And then there was one in between. And in a kind of classic Lebovian study of, it showed that the students in the more traditional context preferred manners of request that were derived from Indian languages more. Again, these are some details of the study. 164 undergraduates. I'm just flying through now. And it was, can I have a glass of water? That's my, how about this one in American context? Hey, can I get some water? No, you can't get it. I'm working for you. I'm behind the counter. I'll get it for you. I'm the sarcastic waiter. Like that was, whoops, that was one of my jobs. But can I get some fries with that? No, I'll make them for you. Don't worry. But I'm being sarcastic, but that's a legitimate choice within the American context. You've all run into it, right? Some of you probably say it. Don't be influenced by me being snide. But can you give me a glass of water? Were most frequent. Direct imperatives such as give me a glass of water, get me some water, were also used. In the American context, that would be pretty harsh, and that's why I love using this. Students can't believe that if I understood the article correctly, in certain contexts, it's more polite. It's seen to be more polite and appropriate to the context to use a direct imperative than to use an indirect, could I have this, or could you please get me some water? May I have some water, please? All those ones, yeah. From a relative are likely to use direct imperatives. So, and what I really enjoyed from this were your conclusions. And my idea is to kind of look at the way you're using linguistic theory to create a methodology that kind of creates an empirically substantiable hypothesis about the way Indian society works. It's very complicated. As a linguistic act, it's very hard to do. And so I enjoyed how you did this. There's an alarm going to go off any second, but that's not the last one. All right, so second, many of the differences between native and non-native native patterns of requesting have their source in the conventions of requesting in Indian languages. Thus, if variation theory is to include non-native varieties of English, the speaker's mother tongue has to be recognized as a major variable. So, it's taking into account, and I know, and you're like, well, of course, but it's amazing how linguistic theory had kind of gotten to a place, and no judgment, or what I mean, like critical understanding, had gotten to a place where all of that was sort of written out. Can't look at, because it gets into substrate theories and whether or not you accept them and what they mean. I think that's, I'm just winging it now, but notice how I went into my vernacular there. But anyway, I'm winging it. Anyway, so. Even when this is the most important part. Partly because I was at a job interview in Wales and I failed that interview because I said what Mina is saying here. Even when a non-native variety uses a structure that is apparently identical to one that may be employed in a native variety, the social meaning of the structure may be different in the two contexts. So context of situation is vital. This is illustrated by the use of the will you question in Indian. Will you give me a glass of water? In British English, that would be quite, will you stop? Right? It's so, there are different social contextual meanings, and what that says is that meaning doesn't inhabit language structure necessarily, or at least this is what we've been struggling with I started studying linguistics in 1980, and it's been an issue since that time. That's why these hairs are gray, no other reason. I'm just kidding, but almost done. So the idea about this is that meanings can vary situationally. And again, you might say, well, that's obvious. It's not obvious if you follow particular lines of linguistic theory. You get trapped into this issue. The people who didn't hire me for that particular, as I said, no, meanings can vary. Oh no, they wouldn't, because there would be no language structure. The language structure falls apart. Stamp, you are not getting this job. I'm like, I don't want this job. I didn't say that, but I did want the job, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Sorry, but okay. Fourth, variation studies must pay attention to the differences between, oh yeah, now this one has to be here because you see all this criticism of world Englishes that it's only about national varieties. That is insane and unread. I can only say it like that, I'm sorry, but what this is saying, so you are saying in 1982 that it's not just about difference between native and non-native. It's not just about difference between, say, American English and Indian English, whatever nativity means, but also variation within a non-native variety. And so you're pointing that out very clearly, that we are talking about variation in all contexts, right? So it's just good to take that. Don't believe everything that you read now. And I hate to, a lot of global English is not paying attention to things like this that were said, that are present in the literature. And so you do have to be careful. If there's a rebranding exercise, you kind of have to read the fine print, is all I'm saying. And also read the backstory, which is this. So I guess there is a sort of politics to that. In the long run, pragmatic variation may well come to be seen as fraught with greater social consequences in interpersonal interaction. I've certainly taken those risks today. I can't come back to the languages of India and in New York. Again, wonderfully critical. The children of Asian immigrants may not be bilingual in the sense that their parents are. This is what I overheard Sridhar saying this after at some point, I think at lunchtime, you said basically this, and I'm not saying you're not original because you are, but it's like, these ideas live. We have to question the meanings of the linguistic terminology we use. Not to dismiss it, but to say, well, wait a minute, what's the value? Are there different types of bilingualism? That is legitimate. Asian Indians in the United States seem to be a fairly distinctive group in terms of their patterns of language use. I would agree with that, based on my limited experience. Most Asian Indians are multilingual. Oh yeah, I got 2 more minutes by my own calculation. They have partial competence in each of the languages of their verbal repertoire. This is where you're talking about partial competence, which is quite interesting too. It's saying, it's not the Chomskyan definition of competence. It's different, it's applied to functionality in the social world. It's precisely this kind of bilingualism, multilingualism that needs to be studied. And the terms maintenance and shift need to be defined within these parameters for the Asian Indian community. I don't remember if that I think I put the capital in there by mistake when I was typing this. And these are the sources. Kamal Sridhar, 1997, The Languages of India in New York, in Garcia and Fishman, The Multilingual Apple, that hits very close to home for you. It's like when I read Walt Wolfram about Detroit. K.K. Sridhar, Speech Accent and Indigenized Variety, Sociocultural Values and Language Variation, and Jenny Cheshire, English Around the World, Sociolinguistic Perspectives, 1991. There was supposed to be a balance of quotations from both authors, both that would be, sorry, but okay. So English in the South Indian urban context in the other tongue, 1982, this should be /1992, and non-native English literature's context and relevance. And I just wanted to say that the thing, I hinted at it in the middle, but the thing that was kind of haunting me is, and here's what you do. You read this stuff and you retype it. I pulled books off the shelf because I thought, well, I've got the online stuff, I'll get to that. I never got to it. But I pulled the books off the shelf and I had to retype the quotations. That made me really think about them. I would have written them out by hand if I had to, but maybe that's going too far. But what I'm saying is that as I retyped, I could hear your voice. I knew I couldn't do your voice, but I could hear the humor and but the humor and the seriousness, and the thoughtfulness in both, and the connection to Braj and Yamuna and their voices. That's like, again, aspects of the oral tradition survive even in the text. So I'll cut it off there. Thank you.
So I'm going to talk about a number of ideas that Kamal that have occurred to me hearing the various talks today and reading some of both of the Sridhar's works over recent weeks. First of all, I'm going to mention that there's a connection between Mina and Daniel that probably very few people know about. Daniel gave us some quotations in Welsh to an expert in the Celtic languages. Mina went in Calcutta to a school that was run by Irish nuns. And although Mina is not Catholic and is not Irish, they were required to learn Irish language. And Mina won an award for being the best Irish student.
Yeah.
Very few people know that.
That was the core 1983.
So I teach linguistics, and one of the things I often tell my students is that if they forget, if 2 or 3 years after they graduate, if they forget everything they've learned in all their linguistics courses, what I want them to remember are 2 things. One is that bi and multilingualism are normal and fine, and that non-standard dialects are not harmful. They don't preclude becoming a convert user of the standard language as well. And in fact, they carry precious cultural aspects and identity for the people to use them. So I'm going to make 2 points, 2 ideas that struck me as new in listening to the talks and maybe something. One is, and I was born in the United States, and my parents were both born in Brooklyn. But I would have been exposed since childhood to a few other languages. And I realized, hearing and especially reading the Sridhar's work about code mixing, that's what I do too. Anybody who grew up in a traditional Jewish culture in America does it all the time. And I'll give you just a couple of sentences. Anybody here understand them? You let me know. What shul do you daven in Shabbos? Who understand? What shul do you daven in Shabbos?
What should we do at Shabbat?
It's like that. But I will translate that. But to me, that's the normal way to say it. I mean, that is totally comfortable and casual and easy. You had to translate it, quote, into it. English, it's what syllable do you pray in Alice? But to me, who would I ever send that to? Another one, excellent quotation from the first one was laid out by the surrealistic. The second was a no quotation. We do all that shtick to be mesameach b'chassan and kal. Essentially, it means we do all those tricks to entertain the bride and groom. Now, we could analyze the sentence. There's not only some vocabulary there that's not English, that's some from Yiddish and some from Hebrew, but there's a bit of syntax that's not English, and there's a bit of phronology that's not English, and that's it. But that's the normal way to say it for the community that I'm talking about. That's one aspect. The other is an idea for a possible research that occurred to me that I had never thought of before, and I don't think anybody has done. It has to do with Arabic. Arabic is one of the languages that I'm most interested in. Maybe the main thing to know about Arabic is that there's a vast diglossia situation. This is common in India too, and in many other places. The thing about Arabic is that the standard language, which is the language that anything serious is ever written in, is not suitable for speaking in any context. Nobody in conversation speaks standard Arabic. The only time you would ever speak standard Arabic is if you're reading it off a text, like if you're a news announcer or someone giving a serious speech or something like that. Would be absurd to speak it, in an ordinary conversation. And the differences are quite great. Most Arabs will even say that they don't understand Moroccans. Yeah, Moroccan Arabic is so weird that we don't understand it. gift. And Arabic differs in, that is colloquial Arabic, vernacular Arabic differs in regional to country and region to region. So the question that arose in my mind now is, how do they understand each other? And I meant that they do. I've seen Egyptians talk with Moroccans. Now, the Egyptian over here in a conversation among Moroccans would not follow. They really would not get what it was about. But an Egyptian talking with a Moroccan, I have seen them communicate. How do they do it? What kinds of accommodations are there? It has been talked about. There have been two trends that have been mentioned. One is classicization. That is, you move more towards the passive language. And the other is koineization. That is, you use features that are common throughout many Arabic regions, although may not be your own. In London, I've heard, especially people from Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia, there are a number of radically different dialects within the country. They call it using the white language. White meaning no local color. You will move things that are typical of your own area, and not on elsewhere. Just an example. Just being with the story that I read, an Egyptian writer who had written a number of novels and short stories. In a memoir, he mentioned that he had always wanted to write about certain aspects of the village, the little rural village that he grew up in, where the kids used to hang around the village well, and that well had a lot of significance and emotional impact for Kim and his peers. He wanted to write about this, but the problem was that in Standard Arabic, which the book has been writing in, the word for well is feminine. Arabic has masculine and feminine gender. In colloquial Arabic, the word for well is masculine. And he found it just every time we tried to write about it, it didn't work. It didn't carry the right emotional so this kind of variation we talked about, actually Daniel talked about some of the misunderstandings that can arise from parallel features that are used in the other language and different fictions in the other language. Anyway, the research question, I don't know if I'll ever do it, but somewhat should, is how would they actually understand each other, people from different Arabic regions? So that's what I had to say, and I guess we have an audio for